Welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Gary Axelbank. We thank you for joining us. If you're asking the question, what is the show all about? We bring you a forum discussion providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities many communities face. From systemic inequalities to pressing social problems, our guests will provide multiple perspectives and insights to help us better understand and address these challenges. We invite you to stay connected with us as the Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. April is Black Maternal Health Month, which is a time to spotlight the deep racial disparities Black women face in pregnancy and childbirth. One of the most overlooked issues is stillbirth, which, hard to believe, claims over 20,000 pregnancies each year in the United States. Black women are twice as likely as white women to experience this devastating loss. Despite proven steps that could save thousands of babies, the U.S. lags behind other wealthy nations in prevention, ranking 48th out of 49 high-income countries. Joining us is trauma therapist and director of outreach at Push Pregnancy. It is Marjorie Vail. Marjorie, so nice to have you on our program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Marjorie, I just looked it up and I found out that PUSH is called the Perinatal Unit for Systems of Health. Tell us, before we get started and get right into all the other issues, about PUSH. What is PUSH? What was it created for? And what is it all about? And basically, what do you work on every day?
So, Push was created by 8 lost moms. All of us mothers, we had stillbirths in various weeks of gestation, and we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to not only focus on a stillbirth in America, the United States, but we also wanted to focus on Black maternal health. Connecting ourselves with our international partners and here in America. So we're on a quest to reduce uh, preventable stillbirth by 2035. So our daily activities is just that. How can we get involved in research? How can we connect with other organizations? We're involved in paid family leave in New York, and so our goal is simply that, to end preventable stillbirth by 2035.
If there was equality across the board, we might not be having this conversation in this way. Let's just get right into it and not be shy about it. Let's just talk about the racial inequalities that exist in the care, in the treatment, in the education of it. This is really the bottom line. Now, I will tell you that maybe a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview with the Bronx borough president, who is a Black woman who has put this notion of maternal health right at the top of her list because she said it's something we understand that the rest of the world has missed.
Right. I think the biggest concerns is that Black mothers are often ignored, dismissed, gaslighted, and we often are the victims of delayed critical interventions. You know, many Black women have lack of access to quality care. We struggle from stress, from racism in everyday life. There's economic inequalities, and those are the things that worsen the outcomes for our pregnancies. And so it's a big issue. Not only are we 2 to 3 times likely to have a stillbirth, we're 5 times as likely to die giving birth as well. And so it is a major crisis that is not being taken care of, is not being looked at.
You use the word gaslighted, and listen, I'm a white man, there's no hiding that. I just cannot believe. Listen, it's one thing when you call a friend and say, hey, you want to go have dinner with me or something, and they don't respond and they gaslight. But if you're a woman who's pregnant, and explain to me how that works, or why, what the heck is going, how do you, if somebody called me and said, I've got an issue, I don't have any experience in this realm, but I
Right,
would help.
right,
How is it possible that women, like, what happens in there? What happens when somebody tries to reach out and then gets ignored?
well, I can share my own personal lived
Please do.
experience.
Yeah.
I my stillbirth happened 21 years ago. It's gonna be 21 years in September. And I was delivering at a hospital that had a birthing center. And let me tell you, I basically was laboring by myself. Uh, the support was limited. And honestly, I didn't get the quality care. I didn't get the focus until it became an emergency. I was saying that I couldn't. I wanted medication. Uh, I wasn't listened to. And it was as if I was not being honest at the fact that it was very challenging for me. And although my initial goal was to do it without medication, when I did say I wanted it, no one listened to me until it became an emergency. And let me tell you, it became such a bad emergency that when I got to the operating room, they started to cut me without anesthesia because it was such fast pace. And so just that point where I was just not heard, it just started, it made me feel like, okay, am I exaggerating? Is this not labor? It was my first child. And so you start to feel like maybe it's just me. And so these are the gaslighting that are happening to black women on a daily
I,
basis.
I have to say this, it's horrible to just even consider it. Do you think it was a case of the hospital just being too busy? Or do you think, and let's be honest, actually it's because you're a black woman, and if there was a woman of another ethnicity, a white woman or otherwise, who was asking the same thing, that she might have gotten heard? Or do you think the hospital is just so inefficient that they couldn't keep track of anything?
Well, I can't answer that, directly in a sense where I know, but numbers don't lie, right? We're saying that black women are dying at a high rate. That means something is happening, right? There's a disconnect somewhere. And when you think about it, CDC just put out a new report that maternal mortality has decreased in all demographics except for black women. So something is happening, right? So somewhere, everywhere, black women are not being heard and therefore are dying at a high rate.
I'd like to, since you're here with us and talking openly, I really, which we really do appreciate. Um, the long now, you said it was 21 years ago.
Right.
Do you still mourn in your mind? I mean, I realize the trauma of the incident you're going to have for a long time, but do you still mourn about the baby that you didn't have? You
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. It's a good question. I absolutely do. Especially because I have a rainbow baby, and a rainbow baby is a baby that was born after a perinatal loss, or in my case, a stillbirth. And he's 18. And when I look at him, I realize there should be two. And often he speaks about, I wonder what my life would be like if my brother was here. And so it's not a tragedy for the moment, it's a tragedy for a lifetime. And so I think the world, sometimes our legislators, our medical providers don't realize it's not a loss for a moment, it's a loss for a lifetime.
I couldn't help but notice your smile when you talked about your son. And you
Yeah.
immediately lightened up. And that's really what every woman, a black woman, any woman deserves to have that feeling. Um, how do we remedy the whole gaslighting thing? Because aside from the fact that maybe the hospital was completely out of control, but you say the numbers
Right.
are across the board. How do we recognize and remedy this whole idea that, which I'm sorry, I can't get next to it, that any woman, any person in this condition is being ignored? How do we
Right.
address it? What do we do? Wring their little
Well, I
necks? I mean, what, what do
Well,
we
I don't
do?
know if you've seen our film. Push has put out a film called Push. Stillness is an illness. You know, and the premise, right, of the film is a very provocative film. 7 minutes, and it follows a family, a black family who is pregnant, and the woman suddenly doesn't feel movement anymore. And the film is great because it gets you at a dual reality, right? Of what happens if medical providers listen, and what happens when uh, they don't, and they are like, oh, everything is just fine. And so this movie is pivotal, I think, in what needs to happen in America. Right now, we don't have standard guidelines for fetal movement. And so, therefore, when a woman is saying, I don't feel my baby moving, depending on your doctor could say, yes, come in right away. What do you mean you haven't felt the baby move? Or your doctor can say, oh, it's typical, right? Because we're seeing on the internet like misinformation, right? And so one of the things that we've been trying to do at Push is doing an internet scrub, talking, getting these medical websites to take down these misinformations about fetal movement, drinking juice, jumping around. Those things are practically old wives' tale, right? And so we're wanting the CDC to be able to establish a national guideline for fetal movement, so that nationwide, every doctor knows that if a family is saying their baby is not moving, this is what needs to happen. We've been able to get WebMD to change the misinformation. We've been able to get What's Expect to change it, and Healthline. And so we need this to be nationwide, so that this misinformation is not causing more deaths.
The educational piece is a vital one in here, and you were talking about the doctors. How important or how desperate is the need to educate doctors? Do you think doctors are well informed but just don't care or pass by because of racial disparities, or do you think there really needs to be an education of the doctors who are involved in this to so that they know what the issues are? I mean, to me, just in thinking of an answer to the question about how do you remedy this, seems to me if we educate the doctors, we're halfway there, if not much
Yes.
further down the road.
Right, absolutely. It is education, but the truth of the matter is the United States, we're behind. Our counterparts abroad in Europe are way ahead of us in terms of stillbirth, reducing stillbirth, and we're not able to catch up. And I think it's these medical entities that need to lead the way in creating specific guidelines. To be able to get a nationwide understanding of what is important, so that families don't continue to have these losses.
It seems to me that part of the whole process for a woman is choosing the right doctor. So,
Mm,
then we're also educating the women to be smart shoppers, if you will, so that
yes.
if you interview a doctor or make choice of, where you want to have the baby, who you want to work with, et cetera, that you really interview the doctor and ask the right questions to get a sense if this doctor understands all of it. That's another part of the education piece.
Absolutely. I know for me, in my case, uh, I and for my second pregnancy, I decided that I was going to go with the doctor in which I lost my son. I went with another doctor, and she knew about my loss, and she was so attentive to my needs, to my fears. She didn't gaslight me. She really understood whenever I said, I felt like something was wrong. And I remember the day that my son was born. I called her and I said, I feel like I'm having contractions. And she was like, go to the hospital. And she met me there. I mean, her hair was wet. She was like trying to get, but she was like, I, I understand that you've had a loss, and my goal is to help you to have your baby. And so even then, she was like, your contractions are not strong, but I don't want anything to happen to this baby. So let's take him out today. And let me tell you, I appreciated that so very much, because Doctors, they're delivering thousands of babies, throughout the year. But for us moms, it could be our first baby or our second baby. Even if it was our 10th baby, it's still a scary, process. And, in my culture, I've always heard it say that pregnancy is one foot in the grave and one foot on earth, because anything can shift and happen. Healthy pregnancies uh, can end up with a stillbirth. You can have a textbook pregnancy and still have a stillbirth. And so that alliance, that doctor and birthing person alliance, is very, very important. And doctors need to trust that we know our bodies, um, as much as they know the medical side of things.
You know, I'm thinking about, because I use the word, you want to be a smart shopper. People spend all the time on the web looking up to get exactly the right item. They don't want to order something from Amazon. They're going to have to return and everything else. This would be
Right.
that you want to, and both me and you are sending this message to, especially to Bronx women, because that's who we're talking to, that you
Right.
should make sure you know every aspect of it, get to know them, get a good feeling. If you don't have a good feeling, trust your instincts, right? I
That's your
mean,
instinct.
these
Right.
are
Yeah.
very important things. I got to ask you this question, and I don't even know what, I can't even get my own arms around it. In this climate in the federal government and through the National Department of Health, we know who the new, uh, commissioner is of secretary is of health. Is this a difficult? I realize you're not. Nobody's backing off, but is this a difficult time to say, "Hey, take a look at this," or no time like the present? Let's just keep pushing forward. Push is the
Oh
name
no.
of the organization.
Right, right. Oh no, we'll never stop. We'll never stop. Our goal, I think it would I think for us, and I could speak for all the other directors on our team, we would be dishonoring our children if we didn't push, no matter who was in power. The goal is to save babies. That's what we're here for. And so whether we're doing our internet scrub, trying to get misinformation off the internet, whether it's our movie, whether it's paid family leave, whatever it is, we won't stop until we help all preventable stillbirths to end. And that's our goal.
You know
And
what?
we're not sure about it.
Well, how preventable is it? I mean, every medical situation is obviously what it is, but
Mhm.
how preventable, is it? Some of the literature you have on your website, et cetera, talks about, preventable stillbirths. What could be done? And again, you don't have to talk about your own situation or other
Right, right.
women's situation, but are there preventable situations where we can turn something around and say, well, it doesn't have to turn out this way?
Absolutely. I
There
think
are.
yes, standard. It needs to be a standard of care to fetal movement. Needs to be a standard of care. Fetal growth movement needs to be a part of standard of care. It's easy stuff that can be done. The same thing as strep B that we take or anything like that. Diabetes tests that we take. They just need to be a part of the standard of care, and it isn't. And it's right now up to your doctor. They should be measuring the placentas, right? Cords, measuring cords, things. Those two major things could be checked and in a birthing person's pregnancy, just to make sure, right? We have to do all that we can to make sure that the outcome um, is well. And those are some of the steps that can be taken in a natural process of pregnancy.
This whole notion of the United States being 48th out of 49 countries in preventing, at least as I understand, the Netherlands has reduced its rate of stillbirths at 28 weeks or later by more than half. Uh,
Mhm.
what, what do they do that we could learn from and put into place to address this?
Yeah, and as well as the UK, I think they do things like the bundles. They have close care, the monitoring that I was just talking to you about. Those are the things that they have that we don't have here in America. Um, And those bundles ensure that the doctors know exactly what to look for and what to do when a woman is pregnant. And I think America, we're lagging behind because we're not taking stillbirth seriously. And it is the number one killer of children, more than guns, more than SIDS, more than anything. Number
Th-
one.
that is an extraordinary number. It really is, striking. Um, on a local level here in New York City, what's the response? Now, I know the movement in the Bronx, they want to, the borough president has recommended opening a birthing center and all those kinds of things. But what is it like here in New York City? Is this a hard question to ask about? Do you get response from City Hall or from council members? And from the health community. Just if you could characterize that, that would be useful.
I think things are slow. I think we do have assembly uh, members who are on board, senators that are on board with us. Right? We're the Shine Act is something that we're trying to get to pass, which would require that nationwide that copious data be taken on stillbirths, right? So we want to know the whys. We want to continue to know the whys. Um, and along with other things that we're trying to do, I think we're trying, but I think uh, things get stuck at a legislative level. And I think but so much we can do, right? We can march, we can scream, we can yell, we can create movies, but if our government, if the people in power don't see the importance of this, then we kind of get stuck, and we
Yeah.
want to be unstuck.
Well, I'm going to answer it. If they don't see the importance of this, what's wrong with that? I mean, we're trying to just be logical. What is the Shine Act? You just referred to it. Explain what that is.
Right. The Shine Act is an act that would require data be taken on every stillbirth, so we have nationwide data on what is happening and why what's the reason this birthing person had a stillbirth. So then we'd be able to track what is happening. What is the number one reason for a stillbirth? Right now, there's no national data. The data is all over the place, so we don't know why it's happening. And then doctors can say things like, these things happen. No, they don't. They shouldn't be happening. And the fact that we're not uh, burning to know why is a problem,
I,
because 21,000 babies are dying each year. That's a problem.
that's a big problem. I was struck again, which I mentioned earlier, the notion of preventable. If there are preventable, well, we've got to attend to that. I'm curious also in terms of the health care in the Bronx and in New York City. Is there a recommendation whether a public hospital is better, a private hospital? I know North Central Bronx, for example, has for a long time has done very well with maternal health. And that's
Mhm.
obviously a public hospital. Is there a generalization that some hospitals are better, or are you better looking for an even more local provider? Finding your resources there. What recommendation would you make for Bronx moms or prospective
Well,
moms?
it's up to what our economic, status can
Ah,
can
good
afford.
point. Yes, very good point. Yeah, go ahead. I'm
So
sorry. That was a very good answer. Go ahead.
no, yeah, no. I mean, not everyone can afford to go to a private hospital, and so I think the bigger importance is what we said about before, right? Education of the medical providers, but as well as an alliance and an understanding about stillbirth. There's still a lack of understanding. I have a doctor friend who said that she learned little about stillbirth. There was like one little section about stillbirth and when she was going through medical school. And so there needs to be this education and helping people to understand about stillbirth. It doesn't matter what hospital you give birth in. If your medical provider is your champion, you will be fine. You will be okay,
Right.
right? Whether you're poor or you're rich, your doctor is on top of it. You will make it. And so it's really about that, right? Because the structures of hospitals, the entity, private and public, it's bigger than us, But you're talking about you and your provider one on one, and that is who needs to be your champion.
You know, we talked about a few minutes ago, we talked about education and education of doctors. I really didn't think at that moment about medical schools, but you're right.
Right.
Maybe it should be evaluated what is being taught in medical schools. Uh, you know, are these issues being discussed adequately, et
Right.
cetera? Of course, I don't know off the top of my head. In the long run, before we run out of time, what is the role of advocacy organizations like PUSH in addressing both preventable stillbirth and, of course, the underlying thing is racial disparities in maternal health outcomes?
Right. I think we want the world to know that stillbirth is an epidemic, that it is, like I said before, killing more children than any other thing in the world right now, at least in the United States, and that is something that many of stillbirths are preventable. And if we can get our eyes and our focus on making those changes, those adjustments in fetal movement, and monitoring fetal growth, right? Because that's important as well. Not all babies grow the same, right? Just like we don't all grow the same. And so paying attention to those things are important in making sure that we have greater outcomes. Now, we're not saying all stillbirths are preventable, but many are. And so that's what we focus on.
Marjorie, the last thing, how do people get in touch either with you or with PUSH to get the right kind of education, to get the right kind of information so that all our moms and all our children are happy and healthy?
Yeah, so we have our website, pushpregnancy.org. We're on IG, Instagram at Push Pregnancy. We're on Facebook at Push Pregnancy. I want to also encourage everyone to watch the movie. You can go to stillness .com, I believe, and watch the film and sign the petition for the internet scrub so that we can get misinformation off the internet. And so people know what to do when they're not feeling their baby move.
Uh,
Um,
Marjorie,
we're on
we're just about out of time. I just want to say this: American heroes come in all sizes, shapes, and colors. You are an American hero. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
thank
everything
you.
that you do. Okay,
Thank you.
we really
Yes,
have appreciated your time. And what could be more important than healthy moms and children? I can't even imagine.
absolutely.
Thank you very much
Absolutely.
for joining us. All right, folks,
Yeah.
we will take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Human trafficking and modern slavery are issues that often remain hidden in plain sight, affecting over 50 million people worldwide. One unique and visually striking project is turning sidewalks and landscapes into spaces of awareness and action using something as simple as grains of red sand. Joining us is the founder of the Red Sand Project. It is Molly Gochman. Molly, so nice to have you with us on the program.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Just tell us a little bit about what the Red Sand Project is, and then we'll get down into the nuts and gritty of it.
Red Sand Project is an activist artwork that invites people to fill sidewalk cracks with red sand, and in doing so, raise awareness about vulnerabilities that can lead to exploitation. So the cracks in the sidewalk serve as a metaphor for vulnerabilities that exist all around us. And when people think there's nothing they can do to address 50 million people being exploited today, they see that they can actually have transformative change by putting these little grains of sand in a sidewalk crack and transforming it. So it's that first step.
How did you come up with this idea? It seemed, I wouldn't have thought. Listen, I grew up in the Bronx. We used to talk about, break your back, step on a crack or something like that. But how did you come up with this concept? I was like, when I was reading about it, I was like, wow, so interesting. Where did it come from?
Well, in about 2011, 2012, I stopped making art and got deeply involved in anti-human trafficking work. And I was partnering with different organizations and meeting different individuals. And the need was to take the onus of raising awareness off of people with lived experience, because it's often re-traumatizing. So is there a way for allies to do the awareness raising in a way that isn't harmful, doesn't use people's names or stories, if they don't want those to be used? So I was asked to help raise awareness, and then I was asked to speak about my art at Art Basel, Miami. I said, I'm not really making art. I'm only doing anti-human trafficking work right now. But if you'll let me do a project related to that, then I'm in. And so I checked with different survivors and asked them if they like this idea of putting red sand in sidewalk cracks, and they did. And so I went forward with doing this for one weekend, thinking it would just be a 2-day project, and ended up, that I'm still doing it today.
Here you go. What did you hear about human trafficking that was so compelling that made you say, okay, we can talk about the artwork that you did beforehand, that I'm going to leave this to the side and get started in this? What was it that grabbed you that said, we got to deal with this?
Initially, it was an article that I read in the New York Times about a trafficking ring in Mexico that then led to North America. And then I started to learn all these other stories. And the work that I was highlighting when I did the initial Red Sand Project activation in Florida was with the coalition of Immokalee workers working to pick tomatoes in Florida, and they were asking for a penny more per pound. And so human trafficking shows up in every industry, and it's exploitation in different forms.
The term modern slavery has been used. It's used in some of your literature. Explain what that means. And of course, traditional American education would tell you, we know what happened with the Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. It took a little while, of course, to really weed it out, so to speak. But what is modern slavery, and how does it work, and why is it such an important issue, not only for you, but of course for everybody?
Well, there are different opinions on what terms to use. And in the UK, for example, they have the Modern Slavery Act. So for legal reasons, right, in the US, we use human trafficking. In other places, they might say modern slavery. It lands differently in the US to talk about modern slavery because of the deep history we have here and how that affects us currently so much. So what human trafficking is is getting services from someone, work from someone through force, fraud, or coercion. So that is the definition of human trafficking. Many people think it's just bringing someone across state lines, but it could happen within your neighborhood, and often does, where you are forced to do work for the benefit of someone else through force, fraud, or coercion.
How did you come up with the notion of red sand? You know, again, when I read it and then I read what it was about, I was like, well, wait a minute, what is the connection? Why not a different color, a different form of expression? How did you come up with that?
I loved the way the red looked against the sidewalk, and you hear about trafficking happening in plain sight. Um, and the red was also the same color as the tomatoes that I was talking about that weekend, but it does make you stop. And out of all the colors, it really shows up the most distinctly. But different people read art differently. So some people see it as blood, some people see it as a stop sign. So I love for people to get what they want to get out of it and take it in the direction that they want to take it.
You know, I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking about my suggestion of other colors. You're probably right. I mean, the sign behind me is in red. And certainly if you wanted to get people's attention. So let's just say somebody's walking down the block or on a sidewalk and they see it. You want them to ask the question, what is this about, right?
Precisely, because I was talking to the same people over and over again when we were doing awareness building in New York City. And I always had the same crowd show up. And by taking this onto the streets, you're able to have conversations with strangers because you look ridiculous. You're bending down, sidewalk cracks. Someone wants to know why you're doing it. It allows you to have a conversation with a stranger about something that you really care about and take it wherever that conversation, that connection takes it.
So you have done this. Now, of course, I'm a Bronx boy, and so I know about the borough of the Bronx, and our sidewalks are all apportioned accordingly. But you've actually taken this to other countries. It's not only the Bronx or New York City. This is a big thing.
In the first 2 years, I was just shipping it out whenever I had a request. So I didn't even realize that I'd shipped it to all 50 states and over 70 countries. And then I started to break down what the costs were, and it was much more difficult to ship it internationally. And in some countries, actually, they wouldn't even let it in. Like in Russia, there was a lot of demand for the red sand, and it never got through customs. So different countries had different challenges. Now I only send the sand out to groups doing the project. So initially I could send you one little bag, but now we found by interviewing people who'd done the project that they found that it was most effective when they did it with others. So we send groups, schools, organizations, a box of the sand, and then they control the project and design it in the way they want.
I was going to ask you, when you were talking about sending the sand and trying to get it through Russian customs, how much sand do you do? I mean, a big bag of sand, like a big bag, or is it, like what is the normal kind of sharing size that's involved?
A 10-pound box is a normal kind of sharing
10-pound box,
which is about 11 inches by 11 inches.
All right, now the stupid question of the day. Sand that I know of is generally tan or light brown or something. How do you turn that into red sand?
There's a place in Canada that has white feldspar sand, which is a very pure sand, and they add pigment to it. So it's a safe sand that they can use on playgrounds and little kits for children. So it's a safe sand to use, and it's just a pigment that is used to color the different sands.
Do you have memorable moments of this project where, I don't know, people have said, oh my goodness, what is this? Or they said, oh, we get it. What are the things that stick out in your mind about this whole idea?
When a number of groups do the project together in one location, they have exchanges that they don't usually have, because doing this kind of work, you're just putting out fires constantly. And they're able to pause and do the project in exchange, like, hey, I really need a social worker. I haven't even had a chance to interview. Does anyone know? Oh, you know what? Like, we're short beds. Does anyone have any idea for beds? And the YMCA might say, you know what? We do have beds on this occasion. This is how you find out when we have beds. So I love that kind of interaction. And then personal stories. Like, there was a woman I worked with who had been trafficked from her different foster families, and she took Red Sand back to a group home where she'd been trafficked out of, and she shared her story there, and I was able to be there with her. And she also made connections about how being like initiated into gangs had a lot of similarities to the sex trafficking that she was seeing happen. So I love when people are taking it and teaching new things and making new discoveries on how we can address this issue.
You raise an interesting point. Who are the people who say, yeah, send me a 10-pound box of sand? Are they actually people who've, had bad experiences, elected officials or other politicians and leaders? Who are the people that receive the sand and get the sand sent to them?
Initially, when I first started the project, I was sending little bags out to individuals who'd been trafficked and also organizations, small organizations. Now it's being sent primarily to schools. The Department of Health in the state of Tennessee has done the project for 3 years, which I hear is the only trafficking prevention strategy being applied by a Department of Health in the US. So, and it's being used in all the LA County schools at this time, I believe. So it's used in a lot of schools and by nonprofits.
So,
A lot of indigenous nonprofits as well.
so when you say, like the LA schools, they actually have a project, and then they take the kids outside, for example, and they have them do the things, striping the. I mean, it's incredibly out of the box thinking. So I'm just trying to get my own arms around it.
Yes.
But is that what happens, you think?
Yes, because I think that people. I was listening to one of the shows on BronxNet, and the first step is so necessary, and I think that people feeling like they can make a difference and seeing that happen and seeing that they can personally transform something is helpful. And how our memory works, I think being able to be active and taking participation and visually have this memory of changing something, and you're doing it in community with other people. So you have this shared memory, you have this shared experience. So I think that it works for learning because it combines all of those.
Well, it certainly opens the door, just thinking from the classroom perspective, it certainly opens the door in a classroom that you say, hey, we're going to do this. And so then the kids go out and they have a little fun and they put the sand down. But it really opens the door to have a dialogue. I mean, there's no question about it. Why are we doing this? And that kind of activity, of course, for children is vital.
Absolutely.
And
the dialogue around what are the vulnerabilities that lead to exploitation, because often people feel like it's them, that they did something to lead to them being in this situation. And for it to be, no, there are these vulnerabilities. There's lack of access to mental health. There's lack of access to, financial opportunities. So what are the vulnerabilities that are leading to this situation? So it isn't something that's felt on the inside, that you realize that society is responsible.
Let's just talk about actually doing this, because part of the agenda for you in joining us is to spread the word, so to speak. So the first thing you do is you get people and supplies. Like if you want to do this in your own community or in your school, if you're a teacher or whomever, the first step is doing what?
Go to redsandproject.org and they'll lead you through the steps to fill out a form, request the sand. We love when people are able to pay for shipping. We never charge shipping to indigenous organizations. But if you're unable to pay for shipping, let us know.
Okay, and then you'll get you'll get some sand, right?
Yes.
I would think, and again, I'm just imagining this, that there needs to be an educational aspect of it. So we got
Yes.
the sand. Then do you give instructions on how to explain it or those kinds of things?
Well, I'm looking, I don't actually have a card on me, but yeah, I have a card that says how to do it. We have little bags that explain that there are 50 million people being trafficked today, and that you can make a difference. So you get these tools and you can create your own toolkits and or create a bowl or some kind of container with scoops where people can go back and scoop it out. So there are different ways to do it. And we also send a resource guide with the sand.
I was going to ask that. The process actually is you get a big bucket or something, and then people scoop it out. And then again, we all know what sidewalk cracks look like. And then you fill them in very neatly, or do you kind of let people know that you've done this? Put a flag in it. I mean, what does it actually look like, and what do you do?
Everyone has their own style and flavor.
Oh, okay.
So some people take chalk, which is very effective, and they write hashtag Red Sand Project on it. It is very helpful when people hashtag it because it is about building community and bringing us together. And when you hashtag it, then you're connecting with other people who care about human trafficking, connecting with other organizations. So it is helpful when you hashtag it. So when people take sidewalk chalk and actually write hashtag Red Sand Project or write what they're thinking about it, the names of their organizations, facts that they're reading in the resource guide, that's very helpful. And you will see when a big group does it that the entire block is transformed when you look back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. So do you do it, with a couple of, sidewalk cracks in front of your building? Do you pick a place that's strategic? I mean, how do you choose? Okay, so I've got a school, my kids are ready to do it, we're going to teach this thing. How do we choose where we want to do it?
Often it's done right outside of the school, but it is strategically done. There's a survivor I know who took it back to the place where she was trafficked and did it there. Some people do it in more public parks. And so you choose. You really have.
You can choose, but you should really look for sidewalks that otherwise you didn't want to step on the crack. And how much sand? Like how many stripes does that 10-pound go for?
So many. Like that 10
So
pounds
many.
goes very far. So you can use that and then give it to someone else. Honestly, a little bit of sand goes very far. So even if there's a tiny bag with a couple ounces of sand, that can last you quite a while if it's one person doing the cracks in many places.
Do you have
I'm surprised.
do you have people who really organize a sand project in their community? I would think, since you've been doing this for a while, that you do have people who do this.
Yes, we do.
And in terms of local, are there any projects like this in New York City that we know of? Or can we be the first, as we're in the Bronx, we're the first in everything, but can we be the first to do this in New York City? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, do it in New York City. You won't be the first, but
We won't be the first.
Being the first doesn't matter. It's about you taking the first step, right? You don't need to be the first to do it, but our individual first steps.
And then after that, and again, using school groups as an example, after that, then it comes time to either before or after, you got to share what you've done. You've got to, I don't know, through social media or otherwise tell people what you've done, right? Is that like what do you advise after you've done it so that it has as much impact as possible?
I think hashtagging Red Sand Project, going to social media, that will give it more impact.
That is certainly a good way to do it. Why does this matter? I mean, do you find that? Do you think it's had effect other than an expression of dissatisfaction with the conditions that lead to this kind of trafficking?
Because it starts conversations. It starts conversations in public. I installed a sculpture yesterday related to another project, and we say statues can lead to statutes, right? Like what we do in public spaces and what we talk about and convene about does make a difference. And so I think just having that conversation, and if you're having the conversation in schools, um, excellent. That's a huge network that you're impacting. And then, if you're having that conversation with the whole Department of Health, huge network that you're impacting, because it does help us unravel what are the vulnerabilities that lead to exploitation and what are the things you can address. 2/3 of the kids sold for sex in the US have a history in the child welfare system, right? What can we do to address the child welfare system and have conversations around that?
I want to go back to how we started the conversation. You said that you were an artist. The value of art, and we know this in the Bronx, certainly the value of art and music that has continues to transform our culture in the borough of the Bronx, and of course the music we've created is all over the world.
Amazing.
What is the effect, and what why does the Red Sand Project matter, and the use of artwork to talk about this very difficult thing that doesn't get talked about enough?
There's a Rebecca Solnit quote that I'm going to paraphrase that I've been thinking about this week. And the stars are a given, but we build the constellations. And I think building those constellations, building those connections matters within the Bronx, within your neighborhood, like what you're doing with BronxNet, that matters within New York City and beyond that. So doing the project helps form those connections, and art forms those connections. We come together to talk about one thing, and I can say, hey, different people have different reasons why the sand is red for them. But to talk about that brings us closer together. It makes us realize our humanity to one another. And that is essential.
Did you ever, I'm just curious about this, did you ever go somewhere and just were walking down a street and said, oh, wow, look at this. This is where, like, well, look at this, that kind of thing. Has that happened? You're smiling, so I think maybe it did.
It has, but as
Wow.
impactful as that is for me, it was more impactful when it happened to one of my kids. Or, like my niece who was like, who's my aunt? Like whatever. Found it at one of her friends' houses and was like, oh, that's cool.
Wow, that must have been actually incredibly exciting. Um, what do we tell people right now? What's the bottom line here? Get in touch with us and think about where you want to do it. I mean, school teachers especially, to just make the pitch. I'm ready. I'm ready to let you make the pitch.
Anyone can do it. Anyone can form a group to do it together. You can do this as a community activation to bring you outside and closer together with your community. So go to redsandproject.org and fill out the short form, and we will send you sand, and you can choose when to do it and how and where.
Right, and the sand is free. If you can pay for the shipping, that certainly would make a lot of sense. I got to ask you this because, as a New York City person, you think everything is regulated. Is there a sanitation issue? Like, will people say, hey, you're dropping garbage around or something of that nature?
Yeah. No, there isn't an issue. I'm actually looking at using a different colored sand for a project in Ukraine right now, and was looking into the sewage system. There are no issues with using this sand.
Sand, especially because you don't use that many. The other thing I've just been thinking about as we're talking, I'm thinking about all these aspects of it. I guess you really like sunny weather. I mean, here's to sunny days, because one rainy day could kind of, disrupt the proceedings, so to speak.
Absolutely. And you see how all of that is connected, right? The exploitation of the climate is connected to exploitation of people. And that's also, shows up on the sidewalk cracks and what happens with the sand. We're seeing how all of these things are inseparable in different ways.
Well, do you have a future either project? Now, you mentioned Ukraine. I mean, we could spend a long time talking about that issue. But do you have either other related projects like this, or is this you as an artist a stepping point for you to now create something else?
I do have other projects related to this. I'm creating a series called Monuments to Motherhood and Monuments to Caregiving. And I think, we can talk about the exploitation and the harm, but what is the remedy for that? The remedy for that is caring. And how can we show up in a caring capacity for others and mother ourselves, our community, our land? So I have a podcast called Monuments to Motherhood. I installed a sculpture at Grand Army Plaza this week that opens on May 11th from 12 to 4 called Monuments to Motherhood.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what is that? Just out of curiosity, I realize it's in another borough. We do like Brooklyn. We accept them anyway. What does that look like over at the
I would love to have a sculpture in the Bronx.
It's what? Say that again?
I would love to have a sculpture in the Bronx.
Come on down. Who would say no?
We'll work on it.
Who
That
would
would be
say no?
amazing.
Who would say no? So that's March 11th. It opens up, and for people who want to travel to Brooklyn or going to be in Brooklyn, when can they see it and where can they see it?
They can see it starting now. The opening is May 11th from 12 to 4 on Mother's Day, but it will be there for the next year at the Grand Army Plaza entrance to Prospect Park.
Right.
And it's a reminder that we can show up with care, and that is something that we can do on a daily basis to have an impact.
Well, how do I help you get a statue or something of that would work for you in the Bronx?
Oh, please send me at hello@mollygochman.com any ideas for spaces that you have in the Bronx for sculpture. And I will apply and see if you like what I have to offer. And if not, maybe you'll like what another artist
We have space. We have space for social justice and anti-violence in the Bronx all over the borough, because that's what we're all about. So Molly, thank you so much for joining us again. redsandproject.org. That's
Yes.
what you got to do, and then you can be in touch with Molly and everything else. Listen, you're great. You're great, and I love the idea of artwork and using that to tell a story. It's how we have communicated for generations here in the borough of the Bronx, and of course all over the world. You really, I love people who think outside the box. Molly Gochman, the founder of the Red Sand Project, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate being here with you.
We have come to the end of our show today. We hope you have enjoyed this week's discussions on the social justice forums. To rewatch this week's edition, you can catch the recablecast right here at BronxNet.org. If you would like to join the conversation and present your point of view, you can visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week, and actually join Darren next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Gary Axelbank. Take care. We'll see you soon.